We are going to be led by our illustrious legal team, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mayor. So the mayor has asked me to give a presentation on DDA authority, powers, and answer any questions because there seems to be a lot of misconceptions, misinformation going around about downtown development authorities. So back in the early 80s, the state authorized cities to basically find a way to issue bonds that were tax exempt without putting it out to a vote of the public in order to help revitalize downtown areas. This was through an enactment of the DDA legislation. So with the DDA, they are authorized to issue bonds. They are in a specified area that the council created. Originally, you'll see the map in your packet. The area was not very small. It was basically from the river up through Canton Street and up Highway 9. When we reinstituted the DDA in 2011, the area grew. Now it goes all the way out Holcomb Bridge to 400 and encompasses basically the whole area where the opportunity zone is. So now it's a very large downtown area. DDAs have responsibility only for the area in which the council grants them that power as determined by your map that council adopted as the boundaries. The DDA is tasked with doing projects for a city in order to revitalize the downtown district. When we were in early discussions in 2009, 2010 about reestablishing the DDA, a concern back then, which is still a concern now, was parking around Canton Street. The thought was we could get a DDA instituted and maybe they could help come up with solutions for parking around Canton Street. A downtown development authority is a state authority, though. It's not a city authority. Once they're created, they operate separately from the city. In most cities, they work in conjunction with the city, though. And the city funds a DDA, and if they don't fund the DDA will usually cease to exist. But they usually work in conjunction to come up with agreements on how to revitalize the downtown area. Since 2011, we've been kind of going back and forth from my perspective on what we want the Roswell DDA to do. We entered into agreements on a couple of things, Southern Skillet, hotel parking, so we can get more parking over off Canton Street. However, there's been a lot of the city hasn't given them a direction on which the city wants to go in order for them to react to that. We don't have a redevelopment plan for the downtown area. Our downtown area is actually thriving for the most part. The historic district, as you all know, is trying to be developed all the time. We do have the opportunity zone, which has done a lot of great things, but there's been no cohesive aim for the DDA to shoot at. They've come up with their own things, which sometimes have been accepted by council, and sometimes they've been not accepted by council. DDA has the ability, like I said, to issue bonds. Originally, those bonds, the revenue bonds, they will have to be backed by the city because they have no rating with the agencies. And in order to issue bonds, the council would have to approve the projects and the bonds that the DDA is issuing. I know there's been a lot of questions about the current members of the DDA, the makeup, the terms, and such. The state law, I put the actual law in your packet. It says, the board shall have 7 directors. The governing body of the municipal corporation shall appoint 2 members of the first board of directors for a term of 2 years each, 2 for a term of 4 years each, and 3 for a term of 6 years each. After the expiration of the initial terms, except for the director, we don't have a member that's on council, the terms of all directors shall be 6 years, provided, however, that the term shall be 4 years for those directors appointed or reappointed on or after July 1st, 1994. So all of ours currently were appointed after 1994. So they have 4-year terms after their initial terms. They also continue to serve until somebody is chosen to replace them and is sworn in. Right now, I think all of ours have, all of the terms of every one of the DDA directors has expired. This is pretty common in this city. The last time the DDA, all the members had died when we instituted it. So that's how long it had been. It's a great tool for the city if it's used correctly. And they work in conjunction. They have to be funded. I know that our DDA now has some projects in place with some funding coming in eventually. And I think right now we're going to be required to keep them in existence because there's been stuff with the hotel that they've entered into agreements with. So you're going to need to have a DDA to see that hotel through if that's the position of this council. I can answer any questions you have. It's, like I said, it was created as a tool to issue bonds to redevelop a downtown area. Ours has expanded. Their powers have expanded. I've included several examples of what other DDAs do in other cities. Decatur has a thriving, Monroe has a thriving DDA, Marietta, and Madison. And there are examples of what they can do. There's grants out there that they can manage, a facade grant, other types of grants. I don't want to tell you stuff you already know, so it's better. I told Councilmember Hall this earlier. I like to answer questions more than I like to tell you stuff you already know. So if you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer.
Councilmember Tyser.
Thank you. David, you said in the initial establishment, there's 2 for 2 years, 2 for 4 years, 3 for 6 years. So obviously there's some sort of staggering. With all of ours being expired, what are we to do? Are we to have staggered, or can they all be coterminous?
So as of now, since they've all expired, I would recommend restaggering.
How would you do that?
You just reconstitute your DDA.
So you just start over, we'd select 2 for 2, 2 for 4, and 3 for 6?
Yeah. And I would, go ahead.
We have the information on which are which. So Monica Hagwood is a 4-year term. Richard Hessler's was a 6-year. David Lyons, 6-year. Charles McMillan, 6-year. Ralph Mills was a 4-year. And Trent Perry's basically a 4-year, and Dave Schmidt was a 4-year term. So we would just follow that same.
The council did adopt a policy for how they would be appointed and reappointed. That was just an act of council that can be changed by this council.
Is that this page that's
Included that page, yes.
requires a roadmap and a degree to figure out?
Councilmember Wilson.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, David. One of the things that you mentioned and talked about is projects that the DDA works on.
Typically, how has that worked here? Has that project been initiated by council? Has it been initiated by DDA? And then how are they financed? Are they given money to work on a project? Are they given a project and then asked to go find an investor? And then how does that work in other cities? I think that's really
So
big discussion.
initially, it's all going to come from funding from the city. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. In the past, before I got here, they reinstituted the Downtown Development Authority in order to do the Olympic Festival. That was in '96. I didn't get here until 2000. And then it kind of went dormant right after the Olympics, and we didn't really have anything. So that's where, when it was reinstituted in 2011, most of the members were dead or no longer in the city. So this DDA, from what I can tell, has probably done more than other DDAs that we've had in the past, in that they've got two projects that they actually, two major projects that they actually have been working on. Usually they work in connection with the city. The ones that are successful almost always work in conjunction with the city, obviously, especially to get up and running. So a project would be, say they did a parking deck. It's a paid parking deck. They would get the revenue, and that revenue would pay off the bonds. However, that parking deck would still be there after the bonds are paid off. They have a stream of revenue. They can issue more bonds. They build office buildings. They lease to tenants. The city could be a tenant if we wanted to move some offices to an office building that the DDA built. The city could pay rent to the DDA for those office buildings. I've seen that. They have to grow in order to start funding themselves, but until they fund themselves, it's going to be city funded or city backed. They can issue bonds, revenue bonds, but initially they're going to have to be backed by the city.
Councilmember Hall.
So the funds that the DDA will have coming in, are those from the Skillet property? Is that the funding that's coming in for our DDA?
They will be getting funds in lieu of taxes. They actually own the hotel site, and so in lieu of taxes, the hotel will be paying them a dollar amount, and that money will be revenue to the DDA.
So that
And
effectively
will be
is,
used to pay off their,
so is that the seed money for the next DDA?
eventually.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So I see here on page 1 of the legislation you gave us, 1B, the last few say one of which may be a member of city council. Have you seen this happening in the past, a DDA in the city of Roswell?
In other cities, I will say that it's usually the mayor that I've seen. Doesn't have to be, it just says a member of government.
Do you think that this will help? You mentioned a few minutes ago that the involvement of the city with the DDA is critical. Do you think that having the mayor or one member of the council being part of the DDA will help with this interaction and direction and productivity of DDA?
I don't know. It could be harmful, it could be helpful. You know, they could be leading them in one direction where the rest of the council's going on. It's going to depend on how the council feels about the development in the area that the DDA is over.
Additional questions? This can't be this easy.
Totally pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would like to, read it, learn a little bit more about how it has worked in other cities.
And that was just a quick
Right.
stuff. If you put in Downtown Development Authority, Georgia, you can come up, just Google it, and there will be hundreds of examples. And right now, one of the best ones is Lawrenceville. If you look at what they've done, they did a presentation at GMA this past year. where the DDA issued bonds to build a new gymnasium, a whole a square like Alpharetta was trying to create at the time.
Can you tell us a bit about the process to elect or to appoint? I don't know if it's a process by state, mandated by the state, or it's a process that the city of Roswell adjusts to the needs and wants of the city of Roswell?
So the state law just says that the governing authority will appoint the members. It doesn't say how. It has qualifications for the board members themselves, for certain board members, and that's D1D on here. Mayor and council in December of 2011 adopted these policies on how they would appoint members. You can change this at any time.
Could you summarize the process here?
So it says the mayor and each council member will submit a list of up to 7 qualified DDA candidates to the city administrator or his designee. A final list of nominations will be compiled and provided to the mayor and council with duplicate submissions noted. In closure, one elected official will be randomly selected to begin the first round of nominations from the list of nominees. The round will conclude when the elected official gets an affirmative confirmation of one nominee. The process is then repeated until each elected official gets an affirmative vote confirmation of one nominee. So each council member and the mayor will get it. Okay. The mayor and council shall have the flexibility to revisit any round of nomination should there be a representation gap identified in the process. And the 7 nominees with the highest ratings will be brought to the mayor and council for a vote for appointment to the DDA at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the mayor and council. And then the reappointment is if a DDA position becomes vacant or when their term expires, the DDA position, which is identified by the council post, will be refilled or replaced by nomination from the council post member to the mayor and council in closure for discussion and deliberation with a vote for appointment to the DDA at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the mayor and council. So whoever your nomination is, your turn to bring it to closure.
Thank you.
Kaiser?
You said we could change that process at any time. What is the process that we need to go through to do that?
Just bring it to council.
So it has to come before council?
Yeah, you'd have to vote on it. They adopt it at the council meeting, so what doesn't look like one, this is actually a resolution.
A resolution or ordinance?
This is a resolution.
Thank you.
Do it like changing the resolution.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like there's 2 options. Either in closure, when personnel is discussed, following the current process and bringing forward either reappointments or new appointments to DEA, or the other choice is bringing to council a change in the process and then go into closure and following that new process.
Correct.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest challenges in priorities should be for this council to have a plan for how we want to see the DDA work and where we want them to focus. I imagine a lot of that will come out of the upcoming comp plan and the strategic plan. But I think in order to be fair to the folks who are going to be appointed, we need to come up with some priorities as well as a process for how we work together. So I think a lot of discussions need to be had among the 7 of us very soon.
Should we use this time? Because my concern is, so I agree with everything that Councilmember Wills just said. And my concern is it's all great points, but then if we don't actually do it, then we're just kicking the can down the road. And I feel this is something that cannot be delayed indefinitely because as Mr. Davidson brought up, there's things in motion given the hotel and potentially other aspects where this is an important priority. So I guess my question is, should we be coming up with potential priorities right now, or what's the timeline? How are we doing this?
And remember, this is just for the large downtown area.
Councilmember Hall?
I agree with what Councilmember Palermo's saying, and the other advantage of having members on the DDA, understanding that this is a process that's going to evolve, is you're going to have, how many, 6 or 7 DDA members that can also bring their expertise, their ideas to council so that we could collaborate with them in putting together that strategic vision and comp plan, everything that's come together.
Councilmember Judy.
I agree. I think it's tough, though, when we don't know who the DDA appointees are, and whether we are going to, I think the key to this is whether we are looking at the DDA to fund potential projects, whether the council sees fit, or we're looking at the DDA to be proactive and bring projects, or are we looking at the DDA to kind of sit back and just be there when we need them. So I think there is a direction that needs to be set by council based upon who we put on the DDA to move forward and the expertise that they have. And that's hard to say at this point because we don't know who the new 7 members are going to be. And we haven't had that conversation of who and why we're putting them on, because there's people that I would put on if we're going to be looking at projects to build versus whether we're looking at projects to fund. So I think we're putting the cart before the horse of discussing direction before we name the members.
Yes, Councilmember Tyson.
So we have a process. Why wouldn't we begin the process?
I agree. Time is of the essence here,
When's our next closure meeting?
So,
and we
No,
will be
but-
discussing DDA this evening.
right, so the process, which is different than what I thought it was, I have a version of this that is something that's older. I think there was a different way this was done at one point. So the process is, I can give up to, each one of us can give up to 7 names, right? And then we give those names to Gary or his designee, right? So we can begin giving those names now, tonight, whatever, right? And then that list is put together. I mean, this whole process is set up, so we begin that process. And the good part about having those names and all of us going through, I think it was a well thought out. Go ahead.
And no, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I think it's how you read that sentence. The mayor and each council member will submit a list of up to 7 qualified DDA.
Right.
So I'm reading that as 7 total from 7 electeds, but you're reading it as 7 per member.
Only because when you come down here and you get into the process,
Okay.
you have to have more than 1 each, or if your first choice gets knocked out,
Right.
then you have no backup. So it seems to me like theoretically we each ought to have about 3 names. I mean, you can do up to 7, but it seems like if you had about 3, if we can't get through, 21 names and come up with, but the good part about, and where I think this was well thought out now that I've seen it, is what some of the other council members have said, as you're going through these rounds, you're choosing people that have specific skill sets or discussing how you want the DDA to function as you're selecting the people. And this makes much more sense than what I thought we were doing, which was we each name somebody and that's how we do it. Okay, this makes a lot of sense because you've got to almost sit around like an NFL draft and put a list of solid players together to do what it is you want to accomplish.
And it does take into the fact that certain members have to have an economic interest in redevelopment, revitalization of the downtown area. I mean, there's qualifications that are in the state law that you have to have a certain number that have that.
Right, so-
it contemplates readdressing those through the rounds.
Right, so if you got late in the rounds and you hadn't selected a certain person, somebody who we all might like might get thrown out of the mix because,
Correct.
right, because you need a certain skill set. When I first saw this, I wasn't sure, but now that I've seen it, it is pretty well thought out to get what you're trying to put together, the team you're trying to put together. So I thought it's very interesting, and we ought to get it started.
Let me ask another question, though. So am I reading this correctly? The qualified DDA candidates are given to the city administrator, and then the 7 nominees with the highest ratings will be brought to mayor and council. So that's a decision by the city administrator.
No. So that was the initial appointment. So now my recommendation would be to just have each count, you have your appointments and where they are on the board.
Right.
My recommendation is that each one of you bring 3, 4, up to 7 people that you think meet the criteria that you think is necessary to the DDA, and then you can, Councilmember Hall can present somebody, and you can go around and yes or no, why they're qualified, why they're not qualified.
Just to answer your question a little, I think when they say ratings here, it's as we go through the rounds, 7 candidates with the highest ratings as we go through our rounds. It's not decided by the city administrator. That the 7 nominees with the highest ratings don't come till after we've completed. It's really like an NFL draft kind of, or an NBA draft kind of situation. I think it's actually pretty clever.
Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. Is any current DDA member with an unexpired term? They're all expired?
Yes.
So I would think, it sounds like in this process, we would need to go through, so each of the 7 would potentially bring forward, 3 names, and we go through a discussion, narrow that down, where each council member's 3 names are narrowed down to 1 name. So that's kind of a step 1, so that's kind of determining the 7. And then the other aspect of it that we need to do is then as a body, come up with which ones are the 6-year terms, 4-year terms, the 2-year terms. Is that accurate?
No, it's already spelled out.
So that is in here, it's already done. However, that doesn't mean y'all couldn't discuss that closure and, agree on putting that person in the, it's just sort of the 2 years, the 4 years, the 6 years. And that's,
So there's no legal restriction, that's just more of a council decision.
well, so the law required that initially. But then they're all appointed to a 4-year term after that. So where we are in the process is, who knows, nobody's been reappointed for forever. So,
Councilmember Hall.
So this document from December 12th of 2011 was the initial. And had we been following and staying on top of it, the way the rotation would work is if Councilmember Tiser's position was expired, he would bring somebody forward for that position.
3 or 4 people.
Oh, he would bring 3 or 4 people forward. Okay.
7.
Or up to 7.
Right. And then they would be appointed or reappointed to a 4-year term, and it would just continue.
Everybody
on.
would be 4-year terms.
And that way, you would have it, it would be staggered. However, when you look at it, they eventually run into each other again to where they're not staggered.
Additional questions from council before I open it up to the public? Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? Or volunteer for the DDA?
Or just be one of the 7.
Seeing no one come forward, additional comments from council? Any other information you need to impart on us? Thank you, we are adjourned. That's pretty good.